Every morning, the scene repeats itself in millions of homes. A cup of coffee is hastily prepared. A loaf of bread is placed in the toaster. Yogurt is taken from the refrigerator. A cereal considered healthy is poured into a bowl. It seems like just the beginning of another ordinary day. But there's an invisible detail linking almost all of these foods, an ingredient that hardly attracts attention. It doesn't make a sound. It doesn't appear in advertisements as a villain. Often, it doesn't even leave an intensely sweet taste. Yet, it's present in sauces, breads, drinks, cookies, breakfast cereals, processed foods, and even products that carry the word fitness on the packaging. Few people realize that this ingredient accompanies practically every aspect of modern life. And this didn't happen by chance. For much of human history, experiencing sugar was a privilege reserved for kings, extremely wealthy merchants, and members of the elite. It was a valuable spice, transported along long trade routes, used as a symbol of wealth, and even offered as a diplomatic gift. Today, the situation is exactly the opposite. Sugar has become one of the cheapest, most abundant, and most ubiquitous ingredients in the world's diet. In just a few generations, we've gone from consuming it occasionally to encountering it dozens of times a day, often without even realizing it. But how did this transformation happen? How did an ingredient that was once considered a luxury manage to occupy practically every supermarket aisle? And more importantly, what happens inside our bodies every time we consume it? Is the problem sugar itself? Or is the real issue the quantity, frequency, and way it has become part of the modern diet? Answering these questions requires much more than repeating ready-made phrases or feeding fears. It requires going back in time, understanding how this ingredient conquered the world, analyzing the workings of our metabolism, and separating what science actually demonstrates from what has become mere opinion. Throughout this investigation, we will follow the journey of sugar from the ancient plantations that changed the global economy to the laboratories that today study its effects on the brain, metabolism, and public health. Because perhaps the biggest surprise isn't discovering that we consume a lot of sugar. The real surprise is realizing how this change happened so gradually that almost no one noticed. And when all the pieces of this story finally fall into place, it will become clear that understanding sugar doesn't mean learning to fear it, but understanding how a single ingredient helped transform habits, cultures, markets, and even the way the human body responds to food. Long before sugar occupied supermarket shelves, it was already moving empires. Its history begins thousands of years ago in the regions of New Guinea and Southeast Asia, where sugarcane was chewed almost like a fruit. At that time, no one imagined extracting white crystals or sweetening desserts. The interest was only in the naturally sweet juice of the plant. Over the centuries, sugarcane cultivation spread to India. It was there that one of the first great food revolutions in history emerged, the discovery of techniques capable of evaporating the juice and transforming it into small crystals. For the first time, sugar could be stored, transported, and traded. This advance changed everything. Merchants took this novelty to Persia. Later, knowledge of sugar reached the Arab world, where it came to be treated as a sophisticated product used in both cooking and medicine. When Europeans encountered this ingredient during the Crusades, they were fascinated. It wasn't just food, it was a status symbol. During the Middle Ages, possessing sugar meant wealth. At many noble banquets, entire sculptures were molded from sugar crystals to impress guests. Some of these works were consumed at the end of the meal. Others existed solely to demonstrate economic power. At that time, an ordinary person would hardly taste sugar more than a few times in their lifetime. But history was about to change dramatically. European maritime expansion led the Portuguese and Spanish to seek new lands to cultivate sugarcane. The tropical climate found in various regions of the Americas proved perfect for this crop. Soon, enormous plantations began to emerge. Production increased, demand grew, and unfortunately, This expansion was also deeply linked to the transatlantic slave trade. Millions of Africans were kidnapped and forced to work on sugar plantations under extremely inhumane conditions. Behind the sweetness that reached European tables lay one of the most painful chapters in human history. For centuries, sugar helped finance empires, strengthen colonial economies, and expand trade networks connecting entire continents. Few foods have had such a significant political and economic impact, but it was the Industrial Revolution that definitively transformed this scenario. New machines allowed for the production of sugar in volumes never before imagined. Efficiency increased. Transportation became faster. Costs decreased. For the first time, a product previously reserved for the elite became accessible to a large part of the population. At the same time, a new industry emerged, the processed food industry. Manufacturers quickly discovered that sugar did much more than sweeten. It increased the shelf life of products. It improved texture. It masked unpleasant flavors. It enhanced aromas. And, most importantly, it made people enjoy food more. This was a silent turning point. Sugar ceased to be just an ingredient used in desserts. It has become part of the very engineering of food. Industrialized breads, ready-made sauces, yogurts, juices, breakfast cereals, cereal bars, sports drinks, spices, frozen products. In many of these foods, sugar is not present to make the taste sweet, but to balance acidity, improve consistency, or increase consumer acceptance. Without realizing it, society has entered a new phase. For almost all of human evolution, our ancestors found sugar mainly in ripe fruits, honey, and some vegetables. These sources were relatively scarce and required effort to obtain. Today, the reality is completely different. The modern environment offers sugar practically everywhere, at any time of day. It is no longer necessary to look for it. It looks for you. This food environment has never existed at any other time in the history of the human species. Our organism, shaped by millions of years of evolution in a scenario of scarcity, has come to live surrounded by constant abundance. And it is precisely there that one of the most important issues of this documentary begins. If sugar has always existed, why is it only in recent decades that it has become associated with increased obesity, type 2 diabetes, and other chronic diseases? Has sugar changed? Or has the context in which we consume it completely transformed? This is exactly the question that science has begun to investigate, and some of the findings challenge many of the ideas that have become popular in recent years. There is a simple experiment that anyone can do. Open your pantry. Pick 10 processed foods at random. Now read the ingredient list without just looking at the nutritional information. It is very likely that sugar will appear in many of them, perhaps under another name: glucose syrup, corn syrup, maltodextrin, dextrose, sucrose, invert sugar, fruit juice concentrate, molasses, maltose, fructose, among dozens of other names used by the food industry. This is where one of the biggest illusions of modern nutrition lies. Many people imagine they only consume sugar when they eat a sweet treat or put a spoonful in their coffee. In reality, much of our daily consumption happens silently, and this completely changes our relationship with food. The reason isn't just taste. The industry has discovered, over decades of research, that small amounts of sugar can profoundly transform the eating experience. A tomato sauce seems less acidic. An industrially produced bread gains a softer texture. A salad dressing becomes more palatable. A natural yogurt, which might seem excessively acidic to many consumers, becomes more acceptable when sugar is added. The goal isn't always to make the food sweet. Often, sugar serves to balance flavors, improve consistency, extend shelf life, and increase product acceptance. This concept is known as palatability. In simple terms, it means making a food more pleasurable to consume, and the human brain responds very efficiently to this type of stimulus. Throughout evolution, sweetness represented an advantage. ripe fruits provided energy quickly. Honey was rare, but extremely caloric. Finding naturally sweet foods increased the chances of survival in environments where food was scarce. Our brains learned this lesson long before the advent of agriculture. When we taste sweetness, several brain regions related to reward are activated. This doesn't mean that sugar is an addictive substance in the same way as drugs of abuse, a comparison that is often exaggerated and remains controversial in the scientific literature. What studies consistently show is that highly palatable foods can stimulate reward circuits, making it easier to eat beyond energy needs, especially in environments where these foods are always available. This difference is important. The pleasure provided by food is a normal characteristic of human biology. The problem arises when this evolutionary mechanism encounters an environment where ultra-processed products are available virtually everywhere, all day long. It's as if a system designed to deal with scarcity starts to function in a world of permanent abundance. But there's another detail that few people know. Not all foods containing sugar produce the same effects on the body. Think of an apple. It contains natural sugars, but it also offers fiber, water, vitamins, minerals, and various bioactive compounds. These components slow down digestion, increase satiety, and modulate carbohydrate absorption. Now compare this apple to a soft drink. Both can provide similar amounts of sugar, but the context is completely different. In soft drinks, there is practically no fiber. Absorption occurs much more quickly. The drink is consumed in a few minutes. It generates little satiety. And being liquid, many people do not compensate for this energy by reducing the amount of food ingested in subsequent meals. This is why modern science insists so much on analyzing food as a whole and not just a single isolated nutrient. The same reasoning applies to juices. Even when prepared only with fruit, many lose a good portion of the fiber present in the whole fruit. This facilitates a much greater consumption of sugar in a very short period of time. Drinking the juice of 4 oranges is much easier than eating 4 whole oranges. Our body perceives this difference. Another almost invisible point is in the portions. A few decades ago, soft drinks were mainly sold in small packages. Today, giant cups, unlimited refills, and family-sized packaging have become common in many countries. The same thing happened with desserts, chocolates, cookies, and various sweetened beverages. Without realizing it, portion sizes increased. And when the portion size grows, consumption tends to grow along with it. Furthermore, there's a phenomenon known to researchers as the health halo. When a product displays words like whole grain, light, fit, high in fiber, 0 fat, or with vitamins, many people tend to believe it can be consumed in larger quantities. This isn't always the case. A breakfast cereal might contain added fiber and vitamins, but also have a significant amount of added sugars. A cereal bar might seem like a healthy choice, but still be quite high in energy. A flavored yogurt might offer protein and calcium, while also containing a high amount of sugar. None of these foods need to be completely avoided. The point is different. Understanding that health doesn't depend on a word printed on the packaging, but on the overall diet, the frequency of consumption, and the context in which these foods are consumed. This change in perspective is fundamental. For a long time, the debate about sugar was simplified into 2 extreme positions. On one side, those who said it was completely harmless. On the other, those who began to treat it as the sole culprit for practically all modern health problems. Science rarely works that way. It usually reveals a much more complex reality. And it is precisely when we look inside the organism that this complexity begins to appear. What happens to a sugar molecule after it enters the body? How is it transformed into energy? Why, under certain circumstances, can this same process contribute to the development of chronic diseases? The answers begin in a place that works silently every day: our metabolism. Imagine your body as a city that never sleeps. Even as you read these words, billions of cells are working without interruption. The heart continues pumping blood. The brain interprets information. The muscles maintain your posture. The liver processes nutrients. The kidneys filter the blood. All of this requires energy, and one of the main energy currencies used by the body is glucose. When we consume foods containing carbohydrates, such as rice, bread, fruits, potatoes, or foods with added sugar, the digestive system breaks down these molecules into smaller units. A large portion of these ends up being converted into glucose, which enters the bloodstream. This increase in glucose is quickly detected by the pancreas. In response, it releases a hormone called insulin. Insulin acts like a key. It helps glucose enter cells, where it will be used to produce energy or stored for future use. This mechanism is essential for life. Without it, we simply wouldn't survive. That's why claiming that sugar is poison doesn't correspond to current scientific knowledge. Glucose is a natural fuel for the body. The brain, for example, depends on it as one of its main sources of energy under normal conditions. The problem isn't the existence of glucose. The problem begins when the system repeatedly has to deal with an excess of energy over time. To understand this, imagine a parking lot. When few spaces are occupied, parking is easy. But as the parking lot fills up, finding space becomes increasingly difficult. Something similar happens with the body. If immediate energy reserves are full and we continue to consistently ingest large amounts of calories, the body begins to store this surplus, mainly in the form of fat. This process does not depend exclusively on sugar. Any prolonged caloric excess can contribute to weight gain. However, foods rich in added sugars often have some characteristics that favor this excess. They are very palatable, frequently have high energy density, and, in many cases, promote less satiety than minimally processed foods. This is where the dietary context becomes important. Another point frequently discussed is the difference between glucose and fructose. Sucrose, table sugar, is formed by two molecules, one of glucose and one of fructose. Fruits also contain fructose, but in a matrix rich in fiber, water, and micronutrients. In many ultra-processed foods and sweetened beverages, this fructose reaches the body in a much more concentrated form. Unlike glucose, which can be used by virtually all cells, fructose is metabolized mainly by the liver. In typical quantities, especially when derived from fruit, this doesn't pose a problem for healthy individuals. However, studies show that high and frequent consumption of added sugars, particularly through sugary drinks, can increase fat production in the liver, promote hepatic fat accumulation in susceptible individuals, and contribute to metabolic changes over time. This doesn't mean that a can of soda causes disease immediately. Science doesn't work that way. Chronic diseases often arise from the interaction of multiple factors: diet, sedentary lifestyle, genetics, sleep, stress, smoking, alcohol consumption, and various environmental aspects. Sugar is one piece of this puzzle, not the entire puzzle. In recent decades, large population studies have observed a consistent pattern. People who regularly consume large amounts of sweetened beverages have a higher risk of developing obesity, type 2 diabetes, and cardiovascular disease compared to those who consume fewer of these beverages. While observational studies don't prove cause and effect on their own, this pattern is also supported by experimental research and plausible biological mechanisms. Therefore, health organizations around the world have begun recommending reducing the consumption of added sugars, not the sugars naturally present in fruits, vegetables, or milk. This distinction is fundamental. An apple is not equivalent to a soft drink simply because both contain sugar. Food is much more than the sum of its nutrients. The way it is consumed profoundly alters its response in the body. There is also another fascinating aspect. Our brain actively participates in this process. After a carbohydrate-rich meal, hormones produced by the intestine send satiety signals to the brain. But ultra-processed foods, formulated to be extremely tasty and easy to consume, can reduce this perception of satiety in some people, facilitating greater consumption before the body signals that it has received enough energy. In addition, sugary drinks exhibit a particular behavior. Because they require little chewing and leave the stomach more quickly than many solid foods, they tend to generate less of a feeling of fullness. This helps explain why it is relatively easy to ingest hundreds of calories in a few minutes without feeling like you've eaten a lot. Another topic much discussed today is insulin resistance. Under normal conditions, cells respond well to the action of insulin. But in some people, especially when there is excess body fat, genetic predisposition, and other associated factors, this response becomes less efficient. The body needs to produce more and more insulin to keep glucose under control. For years, this mechanism can work silently, until at a certain point, it ceases to be sufficient. It is in this context that type 2 diabetes can arise, but it would be a mistake to attribute this condition exclusively to sugar. The disease results from a combination of several biological and behavioral factors. Diet is important, but it acts in conjunction with physical activity, sleep quality, age, genetics, and other determinants of health. This integrated view represents one of the greatest changes in nutritional science in recent decades. Today, we know that no single food explains on its own a person's state of health. What really matters is the dietary pattern over the years. Hundreds, thousands of meals build a trend. Not a single Sunday dessert. Not a piece of cake at a party. Not a spoonful of sugar in coffee. This conclusion may be less dramatic than many would like, but it is much more faithful to the evidence. And interestingly, it is precisely this understanding that helps us make smarter choices, without guilt, without fear, and without extremism. Because knowing the science isn't about turning food into a list of prohibitions. It's about understanding how small decisions repeated every day can produce big effects throughout life. After understanding the history of sugar and what happens inside the body, an inevitable question arises. If most people know that excess sugar is bad, why is it so difficult to reduce consumption? The answer isn't just willpower, it's in the environment we live in. Imagine a Monday routine. The alarm clock rings early, time is short, breakfast needs to be quick. On the way to work or school, a bakery, a convenience store, or a vending machine offers dozens of ready-made options. By mid-morning, fatigue sets in. A sweetened coffee, a soda, a biscuit, or a cereal bar seem like practical solutions. In the afternoon, after hours of work, concentration decreases. Another energy drink, another packaged snack. At night, the day ends with little time for cooking. Ultra-processed foods appear as a convenient alternative. None of these choices, in isolation, seems extraordinary. But when added together, they reveal a pattern. Sugar is not present simply because we like the sweet taste. It is part of a food system that prioritizes practicality, long shelf life, low cost, and high consumer acceptance. This environment is known to researchers as the food environment. In other words, we don't choose our food in a vacuum. Our decisions are influenced by availability, price, advertising, available cooking time, cultural traditions, and even the arrangement of products on shelves. It is much easier to consume what is within easy reach. Another important factor is speed. Eating habits have changed radically in recent decades. Our grandparents, in many cases, prepared a good portion of their meals at home. The consumption of processed foods was lower, and sweets were usually associated with special occasions. Today, the reality is different. Ready-made meals, sweetened drinks, and packaged snacks can be found practically anywhere, at any time. This doesn't mean that all these products are forbidden. It simply means that constant exposure increases opportunities for consumption. Behavioral science shows that we repeat habits more easily when they require little effort. If a fruit needs to be washed and peeled, but a package of cookies can be opened immediately, many people end up choosing the second option. especially when they are tired or in a hurry. There is also an emotional element. Few foods carry as many effective memories as sweets. A birthday cake, the chocolate received in childhood, the dessert prepared by a family member. These experiences create positive associations that go far beyond nutrition. Eating is also a social, cultural, and emotional act. The problem arises when food becomes the main strategy for dealing with difficult emotions. After a stressful day, many people seek something sweet for comfort. This relief is usually temporary. Sugar doesn't solve the cause of stress, anxiety, or sadness. But for a few moments, the pleasure provided by a tasty food can act as a distraction. When this pattern is repeated frequently, a habit is created. And habits are powerful precisely because they cease to depend on conscious decisions. Another little-noticed aspect is the influence of advertising. For decades, foods high in sugar have been associated with happiness, celebration, energy, practicality, and even success. Children grew up seeing animated characters promoting colorful breakfast cereals. Sports were sponsored by sweetened beverages. Desserts came to represent reward. Even without realizing it, these messages help shape preferences from a very young age. This doesn't mean that the responsibility lies solely with the industry. Each person retains their ability to make choices, but understanding the environment in which these choices occur allows us to see why changing habits can be more challenging than simply having discipline. There is also the phenomenon of taste adaptation. Those who consume very sweet foods daily may come to consider less sweet fruits or natural yogurts as tasteless. The good news is that taste is adaptable. Studies show that by gradually reducing exposure to extremely sweet foods, many people begin to perceive natural flavors with much greater intensity. A fruit that once seemed ordinary can become surprisingly sweet. This process takes time. It doesn't happen overnight, but it demonstrates that our food preferences are not entirely fixed. Another important point involves beverages. Many people carefully control their diet but ignore what they drink. Soft drinks, sweetened coffees, ready-to-drink teas, sports drinks, energy drinks, and some fruit-based drinks can represent a significant portion of daily added sugar consumption. Because these calories are ingested in liquid form, they often go unnoticed. It's as if the brain registers less of that intake than it would a solid meal with the same amount of energy. Therefore, small changes in beverages often have a significant impact on total sugar intake. But perhaps the biggest trap of modern life is normalization. When everyone around us consumes similar products, it starts to seem natural. The extraordinary becomes routine, and that's exactly what happened with sugar. There wasn't a single moment when humanity decided to consume large quantities of it. The change occurred gradually. A new product here, a different drink there, a slightly larger portion, a more frequent dessert. Decade after decade, these small adjustments have profoundly transformed the global dietary pattern. Today, many of the most consumed foods didn't even exist 100 years ago. And this raises an important question. If the modern environment favors excessive consumption, how can we build a more balanced diet without resorting to radical diets or endless lists of prohibitions? The answer lies in understanding that health doesn't depend on perfection. It depends on consistency. And that's exactly what we'll talk about next. After going through all this history, a conclusion begins to become evident. Sugar didn't conquer the world because people suddenly started liking sweets more overnight. It conquered the world because the environment changed. And if the environment influences our choices, perhaps the best strategy isn't to rely solely on willpower, but to create conditions that make healthy decisions easier. This is one of the main messages of behavioral science. Instead of asking, how can I resist sugar every day? Perhaps it's more useful to ask, how can I organize my routine to depend less on that resistance? The answer begins long before the first meal. The importance of looking at labels. For many years, few people had the habit of reading the ingredient list. Today, this simple practice can reveal a lot about a food. Ingredients are listed in descending order of quantity. If sugar, or any of its various names, appears among the first on the list, it indicates that it represents a significant portion of the composition. You don't need to memorize all the names, but it's worth recognizing some of the most common: sucrose, glucose, fructose, dextrose, maltose, invert sugar, glucose syrup, corn syrup, and maltodextrin. The more knowledge you have, the less likely you are to consume sugar without realizing it. Food matters more than just a single nutrient. When choosing between two products, try to look at the whole picture. A food rich in fiber, protein, and minimally processed usually promotes greater satiety than a highly refined one, even when both have a similar amount of carbohydrates. This is an important shift in perspective. For a long time, we learned to divide foods into good and bad. In practice, science shows that the overall dietary pattern matters much more. A balanced diet doesn't depend on completely eliminating sugar, but on the predominance of foods with high nutritional quality over time. Reducing doesn't mean eliminating. One of the biggest mistakes in many diets is creating rules that are impossible to maintain. When a food is completely forbidden, some people start to crave it even more. This can generate a cycle of restriction, guilt, and overindulgence. On the other hand, gradually reducing consumption is usually a more sustainable strategy. Someone who puts 2 spoonfuls of sugar in their coffee can start by using 1.5. Then 1. Later, half a spoonful. Over time, many people discover that their palate really changes. The same goes for soft drinks. Replacing daily consumption with specific occasions already represents a significant reduction in the intake of added sugars. Small changes repeated over years tend to produce more consistent results than large changes maintained for only a few weeks. The power of natural foods, fruits, vegetables, legumes, beans, nuts, seeds, and whole grains offer much more than energy. They provide fiber, vitamins, minerals, and a huge variety of bioactive compounds that work together in the body. When these foods make up the majority of the diet, there is naturally less room for products high in added sugars. This substitution tends to happen spontaneously, without the need to count every gram consumed. Special attention should be paid to beverages. If there were a single change capable of significantly reducing sugar intake in many populations, it would probably involve sweetened beverages. Soft drinks, processed teas, energy drinks, and some fruit-based drinks can concentrate large amounts of sugar in small volumes. Furthermore, they produce little satiety. Prioritizing water as the main beverage remains one of the most consistent recommendations from leading health organizations. Coffee and tea without sugar, or with a gradual reduction in sugar, can also be part of this strategy, respecting individual preferences. Cooking is more than just controlling calories. Preparing some meals at home offers a significant advantage. It allows you to know exactly what ingredients are being used. This doesn't mean cooking elaborate dishes every day. Simple recipes significantly reduce dependence on ultra-processed foods. Furthermore, cooking strengthens the relationship with food. It transforms eating into a more conscious process. Don't turn food into the enemy. Perhaps this is the most important lesson of the entire documentary. Fear rarely produces good habits. Guilt doesn't either. No single food defines a person's health. A slice of cake at a celebration doesn't destroy a balanced diet. Similarly, a salad doesn't compensate for months of excess. Health is built through repetition. It's the sum of the choices made most days, not the exceptions. The real change. Throughout this investigation, we've seen that sugar has crossed continents, financed empires, driven economic transformations, and come to occupy a central space in modern diets. But perhaps its greatest influence has been something else. It has made us believe that small changes don't make a difference. science shows exactly the opposite. Small adjustments, when repeated daily, profoundly alter dietary patterns. Reading a label, swapping a sugary drink for water, eating more whole fruits, cooking an extra meal during the week, gradually reducing the sugar in coffee. None of these actions seem revolutionary, but together they have the potential to transform our relationship with food for a lifetime. And that is perhaps the greatest discovery of this story. We don't need to win a battle against sugar. We need to understand the role it plays in our routine so that we, and not our automatic habits, make the choices. When we look at a simple sugar cube, it's hard to imagine that it carries a history capable of spanning millennia, moving empires, financing trade routes, influencing wars, transforming economies, and decades later, becoming one of the most ubiquitous ingredients in the human diet. But that's exactly what happened. Sugar didn't change the world all at once. It transformed it slowly. First, as a luxury reserved for the elite, then as a symbol of prosperity, later as an essential raw material for the food industry, and finally as an ingredient so common that it often goes unnoticed. Throughout this documentary, we've seen that the real problem isn't a single food or a spoonful of sugar occasionally added to coffee. Science points to something much broader. The challenge lies in the consumption patterns built up over the years, in an environment that encourages quick, convenient, and highly palatable choices. We also discovered that our bodies weren't designed to handle a virtually unlimited supply of foods high in added sugars. The mechanisms that helped our ancestors survive in times of scarcity are still present, but now operate in a completely different scenario. This helps explain why small, repeated decisions made daily have a much greater impact than isolated choices. And perhaps that is the main message of this investigation. Knowledge should not generate fear. It should generate freedom. Freedom to read a label more carefully. Freedom to understand that a fruit and a soft drink do not play the same role in nutrition, even if both contain sugar. Freedom to abandon the idea of miracle or forbidden foods and build a more balanced relationship with food. Because health is not born from perfection. It is born from consistency, from the choices we make most days, from meals prepared with more awareness, from the balance between pleasure and nutrition, from the understanding that no single food determines our destiny. Before concluding, it is worth remembering 5 central ideas from this journey. First, sugar has always been part of the human diet, but never in quantities similar to those observed in modern society. Second, the biggest challenges are related to the frequent consumption of added sugars, especially in ultra-processed foods and sweetened beverages. Third, context matters. Food composition, fiber, protein, and the degree of processing profoundly influence how the body responds to food. Fourth, there are no magic solutions. A healthy diet is built on consistent patterns over time, not on extreme restrictions. Fifth, small, sustainable changes often produce much more lasting results than radical transformations that cannot be maintained. If this documentary made you see sugar in a new light, share your opinion in the comments. Were you surprised to discover how many foods it can be found in? Is there a habit you intend to change from now on? Your experience can help other people who are seeking to better understand their own diet. If you believe more people should know this story, share this video. Perhaps it will be the starting point for an important conversation between friends and family. And if you are not yet part of this channel, subscribe and activate notifications. Here, each documentary is built on scientific evidence, historical context, and careful investigation to separate facts from myths and transform complex topics into accessible knowledge. In the next episode, we'll investigate another habit present in the routines of millions of people. A food considered healthy that, depending on how it's consumed, can influence your energy, your satiety, and even how your body regulates glucose throughout the day. Until then, remember, understanding the science behind food doesn't mean living in fear of it. It means making more conscious, balanced choices that are compatible with real life. Thank you for following this investigation to the end. See you in the next documentary.